So, hello again, and today I'm answering your questions about how gut health can affect anxiety, stress, depression, and our mental health. And it's not an easy one to answer because there's quite a bit to it, and there's a big challenge with it, and that most people's education on nutrition and health doesn't come from health sources, but it comes from either vitamin companies who are trying to sell you the latest supplement, or it comes from food companies trying to sell you something else. So this is where we have to be careful, and it is a real shame because an awful lot of GPs and doctors are not trained in nutrition or food, they're trained in medicines. And this messes things up. If you're the type of person who wants to be healthy, and doesn't want to take a tons of pills and potions, then maybe you need to check where your advice comes from. And also, the other thing that's really interesting is we're seeing an awful lot of studies coming through day after day, which is given more and more evidence that the state of our gut health makes such a difference on our mental health. So, first of all, to answer that question, yes, our gut health really can make a difference on our mental health. And sometimes it's the tiniest of little things that make such a difference when it comes to all of this. So, the first thing to take into account is our bodies produce two hormones, serotonin and melatonin. And I like to call these the anti-anxiety hormones because if they're being produced enough by the body, we feel relaxed, we feel calm, we sleep really well, and it helps to take that anxiety down. And it's not just food that's important with serotonin and melatonin. It's also about getting out and getting some sunlight and some exercises. However, there's a big thing that's just sort of creeping through now. And we've known this for ages. And it's basically that if there's anything wrong with gut health, it can stop these things from happening. So the first thing is if we have food intolerances, these can stop serotonin and melatonin being produced. Now, a lot of people say to us, well, I already eat a healthy diet. But what is a healthy diet for you may not be a healthy diet for me. And to give you a classic example, tomatoes are classed by most people as a healthy food, and they certainly are. But if you've become intolerant to them for whatever reason, might be you've overeating them, it might be the pesticides or something on it, that food intolerance just messes up how the gut works. It causes lots of inflammation and it can stop that serotonin and melatonin production. On top of that, if there's inflammation in the gut or the brain, well, that is often linked to anxiety and depression. So first of all, food intolerances can cause a big problem. The second one is candida. Now, in our lower intestines, we have lots of good bacteria and we also have candida, and it's meant to be there. But if we overeat sugar, or if our good bacteria levels are low, or we've had antibiotics, this can cause the candida levels to become too high, and that also causes inflammation in the gut, but it can often result in that we're eating the right foods, but we're not absorbing them. And that's really important. It's all right to eat the right foods, but if our digestive system can't absorb them, that can also cause that serotonin, melatonin production phase not to happen. Food intolerances, candida, the third one is a poor digestive system. Now, definitely as we get older, but if we get infections and we haven't been too well, our digestive system can be getting the right foods coming in, but it's not breaking them down to get the nutrients in, it's not absorbing them. And again, that can stop that production from happening. It can also be vitamin and mineral deficiencies for whatever reason. Now, we do see plenty of clients who take a multivitamin or they're taking sort of probiotics, but it's not working properly. They're either not being absorbed or they're poor quality, and this can stop the production from happening as well. Now, the big one is the gut biome. In that gut, we're meant to have a lot of good bacteria and we have lots of different strains. In fact, an awful lot of the studies coming out keep finding new strains of beneficial bacteria, and we need to make sure we have them in there. And this moves on to next onto a healthy diet, because if we're not eating the right foods, known as prebiotics, it doesn't feed the probiotics and they die off. And they love fiber. Now, one of the things we've seen lately, there's quite a few of these trendy, faddy diets out there which are not promoting an awful lot of fiber. It might say go low carb. Now, it depends on the type of carb. If it's a healthy carbohydrate, they're perfectly fine. But if it's lots of ultra processed foods with high poor carbs, that can cause problems. So if we haven't got enough fiber in the system, that can cause a lot of issues. And then kind of almost finally is hormone imbalances. Our body's pretty clever at sort of creating the right hormones at the right times. But sometimes when we get older or we go into menopause or menopause or all these other things that are going on, this can also halt the melatonin, serotonin production. And the other thing to watch out for are metal sensitivities. Now, it is normal, but it's not healthy that quite often we absorb heavy metals if we walk through smoke, if we're eating processed foods, if we're breathing in pollution, those heavy metals can get into the system. So the gut health can be dependent on a number of factors, not just diet, and we need to sort that out. Now, the one thing we do find is that when we improve gut health, we often see dramatic changes. For some people, it can be very subtle, but for some people, it can be really, really dramatic. So, to give you an example, first one is we had a lady who I'm going to call Mum was brought to us some years ago, and this lady was in her early 50s. She was really good. She was out walking every day. She was spending time with her children and her grandkids. She was socializing and dancing, and Mum was a lovely, happy, energetic person. And then all of a sudden, Mum changed. She became anxious, depressed. She'd been back and forward to the GP, and they couldn't get to the bottom of this problem despite taking several blood samples. They couldn't find out what it was. And when she was brought to us, and she was brought to us by a family, the family kind of said, we're really concerned. We've been through all the regular NHS channels for about 5 or 6 months. They can't sort this out, but we hear you might be able to. And the first thing we did, we got an optimal health test done for this lady. And the reason why we do this by hair sample, is it gives us an overall picture of what's going on, but it also helps us to see things that maybe your GP would miss as he's not trained in nutrition. And when we got this lady tested, we could see that some key good bacteria were missing from the gut. In fact, there was quite a few other issues, bit of iron, a bit of low vitamins. And we asked this lady, we pushed her and said, come on, what happened just before this started? And eventually, after some digging, she admitted she'd got food poisoning. And then she'd been given antibiotics and she'd gone off to the doctors. And just that process, first of all, of food poisoning can totally change gut health. It can really mess things up, especially from uncooked meats and things that aren't cooked quite properly. Antibiotics that are then given to try and solve the problem can kill off good bacteria. And in my view, they should always be supplemented afterwards with a good probiotic. And a good one is not a cheerful one you'd get from the supermarket. It's finding the right one from the right person. Anyway, the good news is with this lady, with Mum, is that we got her onto a specific strain of good bacteria. We helped with the vitamins and minerals. We looked at everything else. And within about 3 weeks from memory, this lady was back to normal. And I got the most thankful thank you card, and the amount of business that family have sent to us since then has been quite amazing. So that's amazing that just something like food poisoning and antibiotics can destroy the gut biome, which can cause several problems. Now, to give you a second example, a lady in her early 40s had had several years of low mood, and this had slowly started to get worse. Anxiety then started to come in, and then she couldn't concentrate properly. Mind fog was a major issue, and she had quite a demanding job. And it's just she was starting to take more and more time off. And this was an interesting one in that when we did the nutritional work, there was a bit of resistance, should I say, because I eat a healthy diet was what we were told. But we got her tested and there were quite a few problems there. And we did supplement some vitamins, which she was a bit reluctant to take, but we also mentioned to take some of these products out. And what happened was quite interesting. She took her time to do this, but suddenly one day she's sitting there And she feels this mind fog, this depression, this anxiety just lift away. And very quickly she was back to work and she was much happier. Now that's interesting that sometimes we can eat a food and we can eat that for years and then suddenly it becomes a problem. And that can be a couple of reasons. One is as we get older, we just start to not digest things as well or to absorb things quite as well. And a lot of people would say to me, hang on, I've been eating this food for 20, 30 years. Why is it suddenly a problem now? And that can happen at any age of life. Usually, when we're younger, we can sort that out. But it is interesting that some foods do that. The other thing is, some foods are starting to cause problems, not because of the food, but because of what's been sprayed onto it. Now, wheat and gluten are a big one with that, and that a lot of people are now claiming that the pesticides we're spraying onto that wheat is causing a problem. So things can change over time. Regularly, people say to me, again, we talked about coffee the other day. Coffee can be a major issue, and that people said, I've been drinking this for years and I've been fine. And it's just in the last year I've had anxiety. But sadly, the system does change. So this is something we need to watch. So the examples that we get are quite common. Now, as I mentioned, the challenge here is that quite often the education people have on nutrition is outdated. It's coming from food firms or supplement firms. Again, our doctors are not trained in nutrition. And according to some experts, over 90% of the health problems that we're seeing in the world now are coming from food and lifestyle. So it's really important that we look after the gut health, and this means we need the right vitamins and minerals. We might need a supplement with some probiotics. We need to get lots of fiber, but getting started is the hardest part for some people, and it can be a bit of a minefield when you do it on your own. Quite often, we do see it's something small that is causing a mental health issue. And the other thing to watch with mental health issues, from my opinion, is that usually it's a mix. It's not just the mental health side, it is the gut side, it is the lifestyle. And we need to look at all of these, otherwise, they get worse and worse. So, to make this easier for you, we have a cheat sheet. It's a mental health cheat sheet about gut health. And this has got about 10 simple little tips on it that you can start to work through. You could make one small change a week about taking the right probiotics, about avoiding wasting money on supplements, about adding the right foods in there to feed your gut bacteria. And there's an awful lot more. So if you have a look, there'll either be a link or a form, depending on which platform you're watching this on, where you can go and you can access that cheat sheet totally for free. And it can make such a difference. So to answer the question, can gut health affect mental health? The answer is certainly. From my own experience, when I had anxiety, depression, IBS, and loads of other issues, the more I got into nutrition and the more I started to clean up that diet, I saw major changes. For me, asthma disappeared within a couple of weeks of dropping dairy products. When I started to reduce other things in the diet, that IBS just calmed right down and stopped. And then the weight started to come off. But definitely, mental health issues can be affected by the gut. And usually the symptoms are pretty clear to see. We'll get gas, bloating, diarrhea, mind fog, times have just not been as productive. So go and have a look for that link of that form. Get yourself that mental health cheat sheet. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. I'll answer them as quick as I can, and I'll see you in the next video.